Welcome to Resolve IBS and IBD Naturally. I'm Courtney Cowie, a nutrition therapy and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. If you are struggling with the symptoms of IBS or IBD and want to get to the root cause of your symptoms so you can take back your health through a whole person approach, this podcast is for you. Just a disclaimer that the information I'm presenting in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a qualified practitioner before making any changes to your health or medical regimen. That being said, let's get on with the show. So I wanted to do a live today on the topic of probiotics because this is one of the most commonly pushed supplements for people struggling with IBS, IBD, and just gut issues in general. And I want to just kind of break this down a bit because there's definitely some things to consider if you're in the camp of someone struggling with an ongoing gut condition, whether it's IBS, IBD, or even something that's not in that camp. So first and foremost, I just want to mention that there are many different types of probiotics out there. And when we talk about probiotics, one really important thing to consider is that the quality of the probiotic really does make a difference. So in general, I often encourage people never to get their supplements from a place like Walgreens or even a local nutrition store because although there might be some higher quality products in those locations, generally speaking, a lot of the supplements on the shelf are going to be things that are not tested by third-party manufacturers, or basically third parties that check for the viability of the probiotic strains. And then in general, just who is manufacturing the probiotic really is important too. So as a nutrition therapy practitioner and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, like doctors of chiropractic, homeopathic doctors, naturopathic doctors, we all have specific training that allow us to access higher quality probiotics from much more robust research-based companies that will not only ensure a high level of quality in what they are producing, but they often do extensive research and testing on these products. And so the real benefit of having access to that level of probiotic is that you're much more guaranteed for the spend of your money that you're going to get something that's going to be much more effective than if you were to just go down to Walmart and grab whatever they have on the shelf. So I just wanted to start with the whole quality piece on that. Now, let's talk a little bit about what happens if you're in the camp of people who have tried a probiotic and noticed it actually made you worse, whether that's increased bloating, maybe you're noticing that you're having problems with irregular bowels, and it's not just the period of 3 to 7 days that most labels or most products will say, give this about a week to kind of let your body get adjusted. Maybe you've tried it for several weeks and you've noticed ongoing, it's actually made your gut symptoms worse in one way, shape, or form. Or you've taken a probiotic and it maybe hasn't made you worse, but you're not noticing a huge amount of gain from it either. Those are probably the two most common situations that I see with the client population I work with and that I also myself have experience with. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what might be going on and what to suspect if this is you. So in the camp of people who are taking a probiotic and are noticing their symptoms are getting worse, for me, being a practitioner that's taken extensive extra training in a condition called small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, that's sort of a soft red flag that that particular person may be dealing with that particular condition as part of their health complex or health issues going on. So if you're not familiar with small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, it's very, very common. It's thought to affect up to 75 or 80% of people with IBS and just as many as well in the IBD category. And there's a lot of theories as to why SIBO happens. I think that there are a lot of things that happen over time in the gut that kind of result in this SIBO condition. But essentially what it is that it's when the body's healthy strains of commensal bacteria that typically should live in the colon end up migrating up into the small intestine and more so residing there. And what really happens when that happens is that They're fermenting food particles going through the small intestine. Let me just kind of explain. The small intestine is the part of the gut that's responsible for grabbing your food particles, absorbing them in from the gut into the bloodstream so that these particles can make it out to the cells of the body. It really should not be a house or a location for bacteria to live, because if bacteria live there, they're more likely to feed those food particles rather than the food particles feeding the cells of your body. And so, as you can imagine, when bacteria are feeding, especially in places like the small intestine, that individual is going to be much more likely to experience really uncomfortable GI symptoms, things like bloating, cramping, stomach pain, also alternating bowel movements. They could be more constipation prone. They could be more diarrhea prone. Sometimes they go back and forth. With that, having training in SIBO, there is actually a correlation with the type of presentation, whether it's IBS-C or IBS-D, with the type of bacterial strains that are overgrowing in the small intestine. So that's always interesting. It's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but something that has been looked at and I guess realized over time. But the point being, bacteria should not really exist in the small intestine in large amounts. And so what can happen if you take a probiotic and you're dealing with this type of phenomenon as part of your health picture is that probiotic can actually just exacerbate the bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. I think part of this is just that your gut, if you're dealing with this, has become a very hospitable environment for bacteria collectively in the wrong place. So adding more bacteria, introducing more strains into the body when this person's got this kind of imbalance will often just add more players to the party and exacerbate the symptoms. Now, that being said, in the spectrum of probiotics, there are different types out there, and this might be something that you already are familiar with, but I'll just sort of explain this as well. I want to say 75 to 80% of what you'll find on the shelf anywhere, even if you order through a reputable company that has very high quality probiotics, is going to be strains that are in the Lactobacilli type of probiotic. And so these are the types of bacteria that ideally colonize the colon, but part of what's problematic with these types of probiotics, which is the majority out there, is the Lactobacilli strains can tend to really exacerbate small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And for some reason, clients that really struggle with that often do worse on that particular type of probiotic. And I think, again, it's partly because where those bacteria end up landing and proliferating is not so much in the colon and more so in the small intestine. And they're kind of just joining the party and creating more symptoms and problems. Now, on the other hand, there's a smaller percentage of probiotics that are out there that are more from what are called the spore-based side of probiotics. And this can be either a soil-based spore type of probiotic, and there's different strains of those, or other types of spore-based probiotics. For example, there's a product I like to recommend to my clients called Megaspore, which isn't soil-derived. It's actually, I believe, derived from a healthy human gut originally, but again, spore-based. And so what's really interesting about spore-based probiotics is that, different from the Lactobacilli strains, they're more likely to land in the colon and be less problematic for problems like SIBO, where there's a lot of overgrowth in the small intestine. Now, I want to say that whether you go spore-based or you go a more traditional Lactobacilli strain-based probiotics, there's always a potential within the IBS, IBD realm that any type of probiotic could cause issues. And of course, I do see this often as well. And I think there's a lot of possibilities as far as why that is happening. I think first and foremost, there's often hidden infections in the gut, imbalances, overgrowths that need to be addressed. Small intestinal bacteria overgrowth is an example of a type of overgrowth, of course. And sometimes, just in terms of order of operation, when you're looking at addressing gut imbalances, you need to actually get rid of and work on helping the body to clear some things before you want to start introducing massive amounts of probiotic bacteria. Now, another piece to kind of consider is that bacteria in general, if you think of your gut as being sort of like a garden, right? And there's this idea that in a healthy gut, we've got a very healthy environment and a healthy bed, so to speak, for these bacteria to sort of settle into and proliferate, and then, ferment our fibers and, actually help to create substances we need. Like they'll create, B vitamins and vitamin K in the colon when it's in balance. You can think of it sort of like a garden, right? And this is a pretty, familiar analogy to think about. But if your soil quality isn't good in your garden, it's going to be really hard to get the seeds you plant to grow and take off and bloom, and for you to get a nice yield and variety in that garden bed. The gut is kind of like that too. Sometimes you can put probiotic bacteria down the tube, but if there's issues in the gut, specifically like the mucosal lining, where the bacteria, there's like a bed along the mucosal barrier of the small intestine, large intestine, that needs to be healthy for these healthy strains of bacteria to embed and actually proliferate. If there's issues like major amounts of inflammation, a lot of leaky gut going on, again, pathogens that have embedded and are proliferating in there, that can make it very difficult for these guys to actually take hold and help balance out the symptoms and the overall state of the gut. And I think that that's generally what I'm seeing when I am dealing with clients who early on can't tolerate probiotics very well. And I think this is actually all the more so true if you're seeing a lot of across the board food sensitivities, especially sensitivities to even things like probiotic foods and fermented foods. I think that's even more suspect, that they've got some major inflammation going on that needs to be assessed and dealt with appropriately before their gut is going to be receptive to a probiotic, no matter what type we use. Do you find yourself getting up super early on work days in order to get done with multiple runs to the bathroom? Or waiting and waiting to finally have a bowel movement? Has living your life around unpredictable bowel movements and other chronic gut symptoms left you feeling trapped, stressed, and dealing with anxiety? There are often hidden factors and stressors driving these symptoms, factors that your doctor isn't trained to help you find. Getting to the bottom of these factors, along with the right nutritional approach, is the key to resolving your symptoms. Interested in learning more? Click the link to grab my free e-guide. The other thing I wanted to speak on real quick, to circle back to the camp of people who maybe don't have a reaction to probiotics, but take them and again don't notice a huge benefit, is similarly, I just want to say there are likely some factors in the gut that are just too strong to outweigh the positive effects of the probiotics. And again, this is likely hidden gut infections, overgrowths, imbalances, that type of thing. And those need to be properly assessed through a high quality stool test to see really what is going on and dealt with before that person's really going to start to get gains and benefits from the probiotics. So I just wanted to circle back and make that point, because not everyone does worse on a probiotic, but a lot of times people will just take probiotics indefinitely, but they'll notice that they're still having ongoing issues or cyclically having issues, and it doesn't feel like they're getting as much benefit as they might expect from the probiotic. And this is likely the reason why. So the last point I kind of wanted to make about the whole probiotic piece, which gets a bit into the energy side of medicine, I guess you could say, or the sort of the bioenergetics aspect of how the body works, and just kind of this idea of the mind and body being connected via the vagus nerve, and just generally how our nervous system is really connected into our gut function and just generally our entire health picture and the environment of the body. And so when you think about any intervention you're offering a person, including probiotics, there's always a therapeutic potential to that. But sometimes if there's a lot of dysregulation or imbalance in the nervous system or in kind of the energetic field of the body, there can often be issues that at that level that need to be recalibrated, addressed, balanced out for the body to physically, in terms of the actual state of the organs, be able to be receptive to and responsive to the probiotic. And that could include also herbals, any kind of functional or natural intervention. And I do see this quite often, I would say more so the more complex the person is presenting, meaning the more systems affected, the more symptoms, especially in cases of known toxic exposure. If we've run toxin testing and I know for sure this person's got, say, mold toxins in their urine, this is even more so a piece that I consider, and partly because there's a real intimate connection between our nervous system and our physical, how our physical organs function, especially the gut. And so because I think these types of situations are quite complex and there's a lot of factors that lead into the development of these pictures of illness, one of them being significant amount of nervous system imbalances, vagal nerve issues, that type of thing. Sometimes a person just isn't going to respond well to probiotics or any other intervention until we kind of work and support from that level. So that's, again, something I've started to notice over time that is, I think, just a piece of how increasingly complex and how important it is more and more to just work from a multifaceted angle with everyone, because again, there's really no one factor that leads to gut dysfunction and breakdown. At the simplest end of the spectrum, you can absolutely give a person probiotics and that could be the clincher and they get better right away, and as long as they stay on the probiotics, they have very good gut health and the symptoms pretty much stay at bay. That's a pretty unusually easy case, I would say. And of course, it can progress to the more complex end where you have clients where you're trying everything and they're really not responding. And so I just wanted to put that idea out there, because if this is you and you feel like, oh man, yeah, I can't tolerate probiotics, but I'm pretty sure I can't tolerate most other things either, this is my thoughts on why that's happening, because I think there's considerably more level of nervous system imbalance or just bioenergetic issue there that needs to be supported and addressed for the physical body to be in a position to be receptive and responsive to probiotics. And so, SIBO would fall kind of somewhat more in the middle of that spectrum. So obviously there's a spectrum of complexity there, but I just wanted to put that out there because I think that probiotics are a pretty common sense place that most people tend to start when they're trying to DIY it and figure out what might help them with their ongoing gut issues. But again, it's not uncommon for clients to try these things and then not get a lot of results. And so again, just want to inform you that there's a lot of pieces to this, that if you're not really getting a lot of benefit from a probiotic, it might not be worth continuing to spend the money on a probiotic, and rather reassess if it wouldn't be worth actually hiring and working with a functional practitioner that can really help you get to the root of what's going on and help you find that right strategy, working through those layers in a way where your body will get to a place where it will start to improve. And then maybe probiotics will be part of that process, and you can bring those in and have a better response to them. Did you find this episode informative and helpful? I'd love to have you leave me a 5-star rating. Do you have questions about holistic approaches to optimizing gut health that you'd like to ask? Please leave your question or comment below, and I will be sure to address it personally or cover it in a future episode. Be sure to check the show notes for any resources mentioned in today's episode. See you next time.